slide, please. So I guess one of the questions that's quite important, and I just love this picture, is, but why does sleep change as we age? All right,
I've
next slide,
unmuted
please.
myself just to say that I love this picture as well. I think everyone does. Can you hear me? I'm
Yes, we
trying to
can.
click. There we go. There we go. All right, back to you.
Thanks, Steve. All right, so what we see in people as we age are changes in homeostasis, so changes in the mechanisms that keep our bodies balanced and on an even keel. What our bodies try to do all the time is bring us back to that equilibrium, that state of constant. We see changes in circadian rhythms. So circadian rhythms are those rhythms that tell us when to go to sleep and when to wake up. And it's actually quite a constant hormonal thing that keeps us in balance and keeps our circadian rhythm quite constant. We see changes in temperature, and I'll show you some more of that in a second. So your body actually changes in core temperature as you're trying to go to sleep, changes in hormones, and there are quite a few key hormones for sleep and more being discovered. And we have increased arousals and more sleep disorders. So the key message here is that sleep changes as you age. It doesn't necessarily mean that there is a sleep disorder, but it is important to note that there may be an underlying sleep disorder. So if you are worried about your sleep, you should get it checked by your GP. Okay, so homeostatic sleep processes. Basically, sleep drives do not act the same on older adults as they do on younger people. When young people are deprived of sleep, their body acts by falling asleep quicker. So if a young person is tired, their body falls asleep quicker and they will spend more time in deeper sleep states than older adults. But what you see in older adults is you don't actually see this same compensatory mechanism. If you are sleep deprived as an older adult, it's harder to recuperate and get that lost sleep back. So as an older adult, it is important to recognize this and maintain constant sleep and wake times so that you can make sure you don't miss out on too much sleep. Next slide, please. The circadian sleep process, which I touched on before and hopefully wasn't too jargony, I will explain it now here. The circadian sleep process is basically, it's made up of a couple of processes. Processes that are internal and external. So there is the internal drive to fall asleep, and there are the external drives which will tell us when to fall asleep, so light and dark cycles, but also our own internal hormones and rhythm cycles. One drive, which is called the circadian rhythm, tells us when to fall asleep and when to wake up. And I touched on this before. Our rhythms roughly cycle on about a 25-hour cycle, but because of the light coming into our eyes, we bring that cycle back and operate on a 24-hour cycle. And you will actually find that you have constant times when your body wants you to go to sleep and wake up, and you'll have drowsy times and wake times. One of the times to be aware of that you will be drowsy is about 2 to 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And this is actually a constant thing, and your body will want you to sleep. And so I kind of think the Italians have it right when they have their siesta in the afternoon.
Yes, we did.
On average, the habitual wake time and the minimum circadian temperature curve occur 1 to 2 hours earlier in elderly people compared to younger people. And if you remember, this relates back to the fact that older people's wake times and their sleep times are actually moved forward by about 1 to 2 hours. And these temperature changes and these circadian changes are thought to be the reason these movements happen. And so it is a perfectly normal thing to want to sleep earlier and wake earlier as we age. Next slide, please. What you can see here are two different lines. The open circles relate to a younger subject, whilst the closed circles is an older subject. And you can see that their core body temperature, it decreases with age. And what will happen is these decreases occur earlier on in the evening and earlier on in the morning. And this is one of the key reasons that people go to sleep earlier and also wake earlier. Thanks, Steve. You can see here, and I'm not going to go into this one too much just because there are so many changes that go on, and I wanted to give you more of an overview than anything. But there are quite a few hormones. You've got cortisol, growth hormone, and also a couple of other hormones. And what happens is these actually change with age, and these impact upon whether we have more deep sleep or more REM sleep or less deep sleep or less REM sleep. In the top left, you can see this is a hormone called growth hormone, and you can see that the decline in growth hormone is actually highly related to the amount of slow wave sleep someone is getting per night, which is the graph directly below that one. So we're looking at the GH and the SWS graphs. That SWS graph is, you can see as a person ages, which is on the horizontal axis, they're actually getting less slow wave sleep, and this is highly related to less growth hormone. You can also see that as cortisol levels are increasing with age, REM is decreasing with age, and that's this on the right-hand side of the screen now, cort nadir and also REM. And so these hormones are interplaying as well. Next slide, please. Thanks, Steve. You can also see that as a person is getting older on the horizontal axis, they're also having increased arousals throughout the night. And this is to do with those core body temperature changes and hormone changes, and it's all perfectly normal. And research is now coming to think that it is nothing to do with older adults having poorer sleep, but rather more of a less of a requirement for sleep. Next slide, please. Okay. So sleep duration in a normal young adult, they're needing about 8 hours sleep, and most of this sleep is actually spent in shallow stages and also in that restorative sort of sleep. So if you take the non-REM, which is that 1, 2, and 3, 4 stages, it takes up about 75% of the night, and that dreaming sleep takes up about approximately 25% of the night. In a normally functioning, healthy elder adult, you're seeing a reduction in total sleep time, a reduction in that restorative slow wave sleep, and a reduction in REM sleep, and also a decreased ability to maintain sleep. And this is that sort of awakening throughout the night. Okay, next slide, please. I guess the whole theme of this is, does that really surmount to anything negative for someone who's aging? And really research now is starting to point that no, it's actually not a negative thing. As you age, you just have a reduced requirement for sleep. It just means that your sleep changes. And rather than a consequence of aging, poor sleep amongst older adults appears to be an indicator of health status, so maybe an underlying sleep disorder or an underlying disorder that's elsewise is there. This slide is not there to make you worried, it's to make people reassured that just because you're not sleeping the same as you used to, it's not necessarily a negative thing. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so sleep efficiency does change with age. Sleep efficiency is basically, it's a calculation that people make to do with the percentage of time that someone is actually in bed and they're asleep. And what you can see here is that it's expected to change with age and is thought to reflect less of a need for sleep. Next slide, please. And these are some pictures of normal sleep. So you can see that in a child, they're going to have fewer cycles, but they're going to be more sort of consolidated cycles. Younger adults, they might have more cycles. They'll spend less time in REM, which are those dark black period tops of the mountains, I guess you could say, in each graph. And the elderly people are going to have more broken sleep. But these are seen as natural changes. Now, if you are still having troubles with your sleep and you are still worried, what other factors should we be paying attention to?